As someone who grew up with Silent Hill and is also into anime and is a fan of horror in general, having the author of some of the most disturbing and brilliantly crafted stories of psychological and supernatural horror of all time write the next installment of my favorite video game series of all time is a delightful and giddy dream come true for me. I remember the first time I heard about Higurashi. It was shortly after being pleasantly surprised with the Silent Hill movie in 2006. I began hearing rumors of a unique and disturbing new psychological horror anime series coming out that was going to be adapted from a popular visual novel series called Higurashi no Nakokoro ni, or When They Cry, as it's known in English. I was skeptical at first, but always eager for a good new horror anime series to check out. At the time though, no one was really familiar with the visual sound novel, but anime fans were eagerly awaiting each new episode and trying to put the pieces of the story together and theorizing for fun. I remember watching the first 4 episodes and was genuinely shocked at how good and disturbing it was. I was dumbfounded though when the 5th episode came out and how everything seemed to be fine. And that's when I found out that the series was split into 8 chapters, 4 separate question arcs and 4 separate answer arcs. I was intrigued and hooked since I love mysteries and I love horror. I even started theorizing and doing some episodic summaries and reviews on my previous blog each time a new episode was released. I never played the visual novels, but I had a lot of fun during that first anime season, writing those theories and summaries and reviews, and loved both seasons. And surprisingly enough, 1 or 2 of my big theories even turned out to be true that I later discovered in the 2nd season. Those Higurashi anime series from 2006 and 2007, and the disturbing psychological thrill ride that the story was, with its mysteries and lore, remain one of my favorite all-time anime series and are ranked up there with Satoshi Kon's masterpieces like Perfect Blue, Paranoia Agent, and Paprika. I never would have ever expected in my wildest dreams that the creator and writer of Higurashi would end up coming in to write the next big game in the Silent Hill series. So let me tell you, the scream that left my mouth and the excitement I had when I watched the Silent Hill F trailer and saw Ryukishi's name on it could be heard around the world. I was that excited and surprised. It's been about 2 or 3 years now since that initial teaser trailer, and since the Silent Hill 2 remake just got released late last year, I figure we will slowly start finding out more about Konami's upcoming Silent Hill Townfall and the next main game, Silent Hill F, over the next year or so. Being a huge fan of both Ryukishi and Silent Hill, and having watched and enjoyed most of his works, whether it be in anime or manga form or through watching summaries and playthroughs on YouTube of Umaneko, Higurashi, Okamikukishi, and Higanbana, also known as the unforgiving flowers that blossom in the dead of night, and Iwaihime, I'd like to take a look into what I think Ryukishi07 will bring to the story of Silent Hill F, what he could do to expand the lore and history of the town of Silent Hill, what the story may be about, and what we might expect based on his previous titles. If you haven't played any of his previous titles but are a Silent Hill fan, I think this might be an interesting watch to help explain why most of the people who know about him are excited about what he might bring, but also will give you a better idea of what he has done in the past and what you might like about it or might dislike about it, as I'm sure there are many Silent Hill fans that might be a bit apprehensive and nervous about what he may do and how it might change the series and the history of the town as we know it. I'm going to do this in a way that makes it clearer and easier for newcomers to Ryukishi and both new and old Silent Hill fans to understand, and hopefully you'll get something out of this. For starters, Ryukishi once worked as a civil servant in a Japanese government office and has seen and dealt with serious issues such as child abuse, neglect, and trauma, which he has been very respectful of and realistically portrays in some of his series, like Higurashi, which even had a whole chapter revolving around a teenager abused and traumatized by her scummy uncle, where her group of friends try to get her help from Child Protection Services. His works commonly follow a group of students and mostly consist of having a male teenage protagonist. Although, having said that, sometimes he does focus on a female protagonist as well, and some of the female characters in his stories actually end up being way more important to the overall story and events happening than you would first expect. Usually in his stories, the male protagonist or main character transfers to a new school and is introduced to and surrounded by a group of junior or high school friends, which are usually 3 to 6 girls or a group of people, with the majority of his friends being female. So based on the teaser trailer and his previous works, it's really no surprise that the game will probably focus on a group of high school kids in Japan, or something similar. Ryukishi loves mixing more supernatural and occult aspects, such as curses, Japanese deities, shrine maidens, magic, rituals, demons, witches, and other Japanese mythology and folklore into his storytelling. So I expect he'll explore this a lot more in Silent Hill F, and maybe even further flesh out the mythos and lore behind the town, deities, and the cult of Silent Hill. In most of his works, he usually focuses on a big conflict between two groups of people or enemies. In Higurashi, the conflict is between the main character and his friends against a mysterious organization group of individuals that set these horrible events in motion and conspire against them. In Umanenko, it is witches and the supernatural versus skeptics and science in the battle between Beatrice and Battler. In Okami Kukushi, it is between werewolves or wolf spirits known as godmen versus humans known as the fallen. In Higanbana, it is supernatural beings known as yokai fighting a turf war against each other in a school while also going after bullies who end up either being the staff or students at the school. In Rewrite, it is a war between a cult-like organization called Gaia, who have holy maidens and summoners who are able to make contracts with and use familiars, and a group of superhumans known as Guardian, who seek to destroy the familiars. And finally, in Iwaihime, it is a conflict between the hunters and their village and the evil mountain deer god Rokugami, whom the villagers once worshipped but became cursed by. In fact, I wouldn't be surprised if we see the early origins of some of the different sects of the order, maybe even a conflict that arose between two separate or opposing sects of the order. We could even find out more about the mythos and the deities regarding the sacred land of Silent Hill and how its powers and influence had begun to grow and spread to Japan and in other places in the 1960s, even before what happened with Alyssa in the first Silent Hill game. Rather than just psychological horror like Silent Hill 2, I think Ryukishi will focus on mixing the psychological horror with delving much deeper into the supernatural and spiritual occult aspects this time. I think the game will be much darker and much more disturbing and twisted than anyone is expecting, possibly even being way more gory and bloody as well. But I also think he will significantly up the horror and have us exploring a bit more of the occult side of Japan, venturing more into the link between Japanese folklore and supernatural deities, as well as its connection to the powers, history, and the curse behind the town of Silent Hill and in Japan, where Silent Hill F supposedly takes place. That being said, I hope he will focus on exploring the supernatural and other spiritual and occult aspects of the town and its history, rather than just bringing back the Order and its cult again. It would also be interesting to maybe find out more about the white Claudia flowers that the Native Americans in Silent Hill used that were thought to have spiritual properties. And we could also learn more about the spirits, deities, and demons that the cult began to worship, and the rituals they used, and maybe what would have started out as a group of witches. Interestingly enough, the game is said to take place in the 1960s, but according to the Silent Hill timeline, we know that a group of high school students went missing while rowing their boat in Toluca Lake in 1939. Also, around that time, the town of Silent Hill was trying to bring business to their town and trying to use Toluca Lake as a tourist attraction. And later on in 1960, the mayor of Silent Hill and several figures involved in the tourism industry mysteriously died unexpectedly, one right after the other. Perhaps these group of high school students that went missing were actually connected to the cult and some of the townspeople, or perhaps they were forced out of the town as a sacrifice or offering to Toluca Lake to appease their god and the spirits that were rumored to haunt the lake, so that the mayor and the tourism industry would see more prosperity and growth for the town, and so they could use the lake as a tourist attraction without any more incidents. If these teenagers went missing while in the lake, maybe they didn't die. Maybe they ended up being transported or somehow found their way to Japan. And now, years later in the 1960s, the teenage children of these group of high school students that came from Silent Hill find out where their families were really from and how their families were cursed and somehow connected to the cult. Maybe they even take revenge on the mayor and townspeople of Silent Hill that they know were the reasons why their parents were sacrificed or cast out of Silent Hill. As for the Otherworld, I think the Otherworld will be much more psychologically disturbing, both visually and thematically. I think we'll see a way more bloodier and gorier twisted Otherworld, akin to Silent Hill 3 with the bleeding vines like in the trailer, and the bleeding walls. But most importantly, I think this would actually be a great opportunity for us to possibly see and experience more than one Otherworld and more variations of the Otherworld with multiple characters, allowing us to experience the point of view of a group of characters this time who might explore their own versions of Silent Hill and the Otherworld. I say this because Ryukishi's games and stories usually delve into not just suspense and psychological trauma and horror, but they also typically follow a group of characters focusing on and alternating between different points of view and different people's version of the same story, even allowing us to see or experience the same events or story from a completely different perspective. This is especially true in Iwaihime and Higurashi, where we see the same events and same chapters play out in a similar fashion, but from a completely different point of view, and we learn the twisted truth behind the story, and get to experience the thoughts and perspective of another character. This could allow for some really shocking, compelling, and crazy twists that could really mess with us and warp our perception of the events of a previous chapter. We could see the characters and events in a completely different way, which would make us question what is really happening and what the reality, behavior, and psyche of each character is like, to really delve into them and flesh them and the story out. Most of Ryukishi's works deal with people being stuck in time loops, alternate realities, alternate dimensions, and people's nightmares, and being able to go back and change your fate or changing the past, which works well for a series like Silent Hill, where people can become trapped in their own loop, like Anita in The Short Message. And many have theorized happened to James as well, due to all the dead bodies resembling him in Silent Hill 2. Since this is Silent Hill, I think we'll definitely see a lot of those similar themes that Ryukishi has used expanded upon and probably pushed even further, blurring the line between reality, psychological horror, and interesting new takes on time loops, alternate dimensions, and realities, and possibly them even converging, merging, or overlapping into one. As for the story, I suspect we'll have several different playable characters stuck in some kind of time loop, or experiencing some kind of curse, where we get to experience their life and psyche, experiencing a different nightmare and otherworld for each one that manifests and takes over their town, based on their own twisted personalities, struggles, their past, and trauma. I think we will definitely experience something like this in Silent Hill F, where we will either play and experience different characters' point of view and see their traumas and nightmares come to life, or we will be able to see these other characters' other worlds and possibly help or deal with their nightmares spilling over into wherever we are in the game, like we had happen with Henry in Silent Hill 4. Ryukishi has done this with Iwaihime, one of his lesser-known works. It is actually very Silent Hill-esque. That story followed a transfer student coming to live in a new town where he befriends multiple people at his school and meets a mysterious and creepy girl who always holds a Japanese doll. The doll's hair is rumored to grow on its own, and he begins to notice that various classmates and other people are having vivid, terrifying nightmares and hauntings around town, and he has to find out who or what is causing them. He finds out a curse has spread through the town through some kind of ritual and evil deity that is causing all of these hauntings, nightmares, and hallucinations all throughout the town, with some people even being pulled into each other's nightmares and hauntings as well. The game is episodic and follows how him and his friends and classmates are all being affected by the curse somehow, and how it all connects back to the girl with the doll, and the main character and his family, and the history of the village. Each chapter in that game focused on a different character, and their own personal story, and experiencing some of their hauntings, hallucinations, and twisted nightmarish dreams, which were often manifested from their psychological trauma, obsessions, desires, despairs, etc. The main character was the only one, though, who had the ability to help them with their dreams and tries to do so. As mentioned, I actually think it could focus on these teenagers that went missing on a boat in Toluca Lake in 1939, and could possibly be connected to why the mayor and several key figures in Silent Hill mysteriously died in the 1960s, since this is also set in the 1960s. But if not, then judging by the teaser trailer, perhaps we could also find out that there was a bunch of high school girls that formed their own cult or experimented with magic and used the white Claudia flowers or some kind of similar flower like the spider lilies that could be connected to them to see the spirit world and see their desires and trauma manifested. If the white Claudia flowers were the same ones that the Native Americans used in Silent Hill for their rituals, perhaps the flowers had mystical or spiritual properties that allowed them to see into the spirit world or explore the other dimension, otherwise known as the other side or the other world as we call it for Silent Hill. In the teaser trailer for Silent Hill F, the teenage girl seems to be visiting a child's grave with a Jizo statue. And you'll notice that she's not carrying the pipe there. Rather, the pipe is already on the ground, as if some vandals already left it there after vandalizing the grave. While some people think the teenage girl might have destroyed the statue, to me it also seems like she was mad and picks up the pipe and is going after whoever destroyed the statue to get revenge or to kill them. Judging by this teaser trailer, I'd say the game will focus on the person whose grave this girl is visiting. I think the story will focus on a group of high school kids trying to prevent or stop the death of their classmate, friend, or child that died that possibly sets this whole scenario in motion. If you played Ryukishi's previous work, you will know that Ryukishi's works are about preventing certain deaths or events that trigger a series of bad things to happen. And the dangerous girl with the pipe is a familiar theme he likes using, as his works usually feature psychotic and dangerous girls with weapons as well. It could be that this dead child was the girl's classmate or friend/relative whose death was the catalyst for the curse or the otherworld manifesting. After all, the otherworld starts manifesting in the trailer after the girl visits the grave and sees the Jesus statue destroyed. It could also be said that the vines also begin manifesting sometime after the girl grabs the pipe and is seen dragging it around with an injured arm. So it could be that she picked up the pipe at the gravesite and used the pipe in some kind of fight or struggle with someone to get revenge on them for destroying the statue, perhaps even killing someone with it. If the child classmate that died was their friend, maybe she decided to go after and kill the person or group of classmates that vandalized the grave and somehow unleashed a curse upon the town. These same vandals that destroyed the statue could have even had something to do with being responsible for this classmate or child's death, and that's why they vandalized it. We could also find out that after the death of her friend, that she and her friends decided to communicate with the dead child spiritually and get revenge on the vandals and those responsible for their death using the white Claudia flower that let them see the dead or let them see into the spirit world or the other world, where all their secret wishes, psychotic drama, and monsters started manifesting, but becoming worse and began to take over the town as a curse. I could even see her giving the vandals or whoever was responsible for the child's death the white Claudia flowers, or even using the spiritual properties of it to get revenge on the vandals and scare them and make their trauma come back to haunt them in the form of seeing and being haunted by the dead child's spirit torturing them, using the spiritual effects of the flowers to manifest their trauma like Silent Hill does. Actually, now that I think about it, one of the sects of the order is called the Sect of the Holy Mother, and they used to worship a giant stone in the Silent Hill woods known as the Mother Stone, which they considered as a holy and sacred entity that the natives had also used to talk to their dead ancestors. The Sect of the Holy Mother used stones for their rituals as well, and they also called their god the Holy Mother, and believed their Holy Mother could be conjured by performing a ritual, which would allow their god to descend into a sacred object like the Mother Stone. They also used rituals to resurrect the dead that James finds in Silent Hill 2. So it's interesting that we have a sacred stone like a Jesus statue that was destroyed over the grave of someone. If the girl and her friends were descended from some members of the order, or they were witches and practicing magic, perhaps they began using the white Claudia or spider lily flowers to experience the other side and communicate with an otherworldly manifestation of the dead child or classmate. Perhaps they eventually began to worship this dead child classmate and made them their holy mother or god, where they formed a cult in order to kill the vandals or other classmates and make offerings or sacrifices to lift the curse and to resurrect the spirit of the dead child who became like their god. They could have even used what was left of the stone or the statues left over from the vandalized statue to conjure and perform rituals to allow their god or the dead child to possibly take over the sacred object and use it as their own mother stone, or some kind of source of power that the curse or otherworld would draw on to spread and take over the town like we see in the trailer. On the other side of the table, if the girl we see in the trailer really did destroy the statue and was responsible for the death of the child or the classmate in this grave, then maybe the child or classmate that died was an outcast and was bullied or possibly related or connected to the order and thought of as a witch and shunned and killed, sacrificed by the girl and her friends, unleashing the power of Silent Hill and setting off some kind of curse that gets activated or unleashed when the statue is destroyed. To save themselves, maybe they decided to communicate with the dead child spiritually using the white Claudia flowers, and eventually they began to worship them and make them their god, where they had to form a cult in order to make offerings and had to sacrifice their own other classmates and the whole village to save themselves and appease the curse and their god. I do know Ryukishi has used this before, where he's had children that became deities or gods, and villages that worship these childlike deities in some of his previous works. So it wouldn't surprise me if he does here too, especially since Alyssa was also a child that was cultivated by the Order in the first Silent Hill. It's also pretty interesting to me how the teenage girl in the trailer also wears a black school uniform as opposed to the traditional white school uniforms usually seen in Japan. So maybe this teenage girl and her friends were a group of witches, rebels, or Wiccans that practiced magic and used white Claudia flowers, and maybe they sacrificed their classmate for some dark ritual to gain power from their god or to experience the spiritual effects of the white Claudia flower. I do know that according to leaker Dust Golem, the free Silent Hill experience Konami released last year, Silent Hill The Short Message, was originally going to focus more on the cult side of things with a group of classmates who were part of a cult that were going to use Maya and Anita for their ritual by targeting and bullying them until they jump from the apartment villa to their deaths. So I do think some of these scrapped ideas might be used for Silent Hill F as well. As you can see, just going off by the teaser trailer alone, we already have a bunch of interesting stories and ideas that Ryukishi could explore, so I'm very eager to see what the story is like. It's been about 20 to 24 years since I played the original Silent Hill games when they first came out, so these theories are just me speculating and spitballing, obviously, based on what I can remember from the games and what I think Ryukishi might do based on having seen some of his past works. If you haven't seen much of Ryukishi07 and the works of his company, 7th Expansion, outside of the Higurashi series, I'd highly recommend checking out Waradu Chaos's Guide to 7th Expansions that goes in depth into Ryukishi's non-Higurashi works, such as Okami Kakashi, Higenbana, Rewrite, Iwaihime, Loopers, and a few other lesser known titles. It's a great video and delves into the story and psychological horror of his work in more depth. Regardless, whatever Ryukishi comes up with, I'm sure it will be graphic, disturbing, psychotic, and very twisted. I think we really lucked out in getting Ryukishi, and I think he will be the best fit for the series and the most well-suited to actually explore and further flesh out the origins and mythos of Silent Hill. He could do a lot with exploring the mythology, the history, and the supernatural and occult aspects of the town, and explain how it connected to Japan, along with delving further into all this disturbing and mind-bending psychological horror and trauma that both he and the Silent Hill series is known for. I just hope Konami actually lets him tell the story that he wants to tell, and doesn't try to make him tone down the more disturbing, gorier, and twisted aspects of his works, because his works can get very dark and disturbing, with people torturing others, beating them to a bloody pulp, killing them in gruesome and painful ways, having disturbing thoughts and urges, etc. I heard that the short message was originally going to be much darker, with a much darker ending, and heard they changed it to make it a good ending instead. So I am a little worried that the producers of the series, like Okamoto, might try to make him tone down or interfere with the story and direction of the game. If they thought the short message was too disturbing and dealing with upsetting and sensitive topics, then I'd hate to see what they'd think of Ryukishi's content, because his content is way more darker and disturbing. That's about my only worry with Silent Hill F. Still, I can't wait to see what Ryukishi brings to Silent Hill and how Silent Hill F will turn out. So, what are your thoughts? Have you seen Higurashi or played any of Ryukishi's games or seen any adaptations of them? What do you think he will do with the game and story of Silent Hill? Do you think he'll make it better? Let me know in the comments below. And if you haven't seen any of his works, I'd highly recommend checking out the original 2006 and 2007 Higurashi animes and its sequel, Higurashi Kai, and also looking into Iwaihime, as it's probably the one that is most like Silent Hill. See you all next time.